All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies course, I've been going through and creating a series of video presentations that are based off of the Mozilla Developer Network Learn Web Development series. So far, I have gone through the Getting Started with the Web and the HTML Structuring the Web. I'm near the bottom of the Styling the Web section. I'm down on the last part, which is layout, and I'm down to legacy layout methods. All right, and as they mentioned, grid systems are a very common feature used in layouts. And before CSS Grid, they tended to be implemented using floats and other features. It says, imagine your layout is a number of columns. Typically, it's usually like 4, 12, 16, something like that. And then fit your content inside of these imaginary columns. In this article, it says we'll explore how these older methods work in order for you to understand how they used to be used to work on older projects. Again, legacy does imply that it's been around for a while. So, it says CSS did not have a built-in CSS grid system until fairly recently. All right, so if something was built before that, and you didn't use things like CSS Grid or Flexbox or whatever, you use some of the more older technologies, so to speak, or tools. As it says, we refer to these as legacy type of systems. For new projects, as it says, in most cases, the grid layout will be used in combination with one or more layouts. So you might have a grid layout, and inside of there, you might do some work with Flexbox, etc. So this lesson will explain, as mentioned right there, how grid systems and grid frameworks based on floats and Flexbox work. All right. It's worth bearing in mind, as it says, as we explore these systems, that none of them actually create a grid the way that it's done today. They work by giving items a size, and pushing them around in a way that looks like a grid. So, simplest example they're showing right there. As it says, it's a simple 2-column layout. So let's grab this, copy it to the clipboard, come into our file here, and first off, let's get rid of all the CSS that's currently in here. This was from the last lesson when we had our media queries and the like. So that's now all gone. And then let's come into our body here, and let's get rid of everything that's in there. And again, we just replace it. This is going to be very simple, as you can well see. So right now, there has not been any CSS that's been applied to this yet. All right, so 2-column layout example, first column, second column. It's not columnar right now, as you can plainly tell. All right, so it says each one of these columns needs an outer element to contain its content. So basically it needs to show and know the way that it was set up. All right, I did do a good job today of putting my phone on mute, but I did get a call. So let's just jump back in. So here's the CSS. What are we doing here? The width is 90%. The max width is 900 pixels. And margin 0 auto. So let's put that CSS in. So right there. Let's save. Let's go back to this and refresh. All right. Now, do we have a 2-column layout? Well, it's laid out better than it was. I'm looking at it that we have a 2-row layout, not a 2-column layout. So the body is at 90%. The most it can take up is 900 pixels. All right. And it's centered. Okay, no biggie right there. Now look what we're doing here. We're saying that each div should have a width of 48%. All right. Well, this, I believe at least, copy that. This is going to give us our actual 2-column layout. And let's see if I'm correct or not. All right. Now, you might say, well, not really. Well, it says here we've got both to be 48% of the parent's width, which equals 96%, leaving us 4% to act as a gutter area. Now we need to float them. All right. So again, that's the last step. And notice that the first one is floated left and the second one is floated right. And voila, we've got our 2-column format. All right. Again, this is the legacy, or more or less the older way of doing it. All right. So they mention here, it says, you'll notice that we're using percentages for all the widths. And that is, as it says, it's a good strategy because it creates what's referred to as a liquid layout. It does the best it can to keep the ratios, even on smaller screen sizes, to keep it looking as good as it can make it look. Now, one thing to notice is what happens when this thing gets really small. Okay, it's not responsive. So we probably want to put a media query in there that maybe when we get to, I don't know, right here or around there, we break this down so that we basically remove the floats. All right. So if we came in here and tried doing something like this, I'm doing this off the top of my head, but at media, screen only, and max width, we'll use 576 pixels. All right, and we'll say in here, let's see. I'm going to grab these, put them in, and you'll hopefully be able to see and be able to tell what I'm doing in just a second. So what we're going to say here is we want the width of each of these to be 100%, and we want there to be no floats. Now, I believe that's the way to do it. You'll know when I know. All right. So let's jump back into here. Refresh. Does not appear to have worked. So let's look. Let's try 768, but that's not going to fix anything. So let's see. Get rid of that. That's a little bit confusing in there right now. So, well, serves me right for thinking I can do something on the fly like that. But hopefully we're going to get to that where we turn that off. That was my understanding that that was the way that we did it. So as you can see this example in right here. So here it is. And again, totally non-responsive. All right, you could say, well, yeah, it is. Yeah, but it looks terrible. All right, you typically want to make this a single columnar format. So we have to look in here. Nth of type 1, float none. Well, I thought that would do what we wanted it to do here. but evidently it's not. All right. Let's just jump ahead here. Oops. Creating simple legacy grid frameworks. It says the majority of these use the float property to float one column up next to the other. Well, that's kind of what you've already seen. So let's take a look at the example that they have here. It's just going to look pretty ugly the way it looks. Simplegrid.html. So I'm just going to grab their code and I'm going to paste it into our download file. And again, right now there is no CSS that's been applied to it. So it looks like this. Just the numbers 1 to 16 it looks like. Okay, you can see them there. All right. The aim is to turn this into a demonstration grid of 2 rows. Okay. First one goes 1 to 12. And the second one goes 13 to 16. And you'll notice the sizes of these as well. So we're coming in here. We're adding this. So in the style element, it says add the following code, which gives the wrapper container a width of 900 pixels with padding on the right of 20 pixels, leaving us 960 pixels for our entire area, including gutter. In this case, the padding is subtracted from the total content width because we've set the border box. We've already talked about that. So let's copy that. All right, we put that in. I don't believe, let's see, I don't believe that's going to change the way that this looks a lot. But let's see. We're not done yet. Just moved it over. Okay, fine. Now use the row container that is wrapped around each row and add the following rule. Which, as of now, looks like did nothing. Applying this clearing means that we don't need to completely fill each row. All right, the gutters between the columns are 20 wide. We need to subtract that from our total, giving us 720 pixels to work with. Our next step is to create a rule for the class col, floating it to the left with a margin of 20 pixels. So here's where the magic hopefully will start to begin. Let's take a look at it and then come back and talk about it. All right, pretty much the way they showed it in the picture. Now let's talk about why it worked like that and what happened. All right, we're telling it to float left. We want a 20 pixel margin. We want the width of each one of these things to be 60 pixels, and we wanted to put in the background color. So it says the top row will now lay out neatly as a grid without using CSS grid, Flexbox, or anything like that. All right. Layout containers that we want to span more than one column need to be given special classes to adjust their width values accordingly. So it says add the following at the bottom of your CSS. With these classes in effect, we can now lay out different widths of columns on the grid. Try saving and loading the page to see the changes. All right. And you can see we now have, these are now of different sizes. Okay. Creating a fluid grid, how about before we do that, let's stop and we'll do that in the next lesson.